The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest room ever built by any species in the known galaxy. It floated at the center of a massive orbital station, surrounded by stars on every side, and inside it sat representatives from over 300 alien civilizations. The ceiling was so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. The seats rose in great circles, one above the other, and every seat was filled. At the very bottom of the chamber, standing alone at a small podium made of plain gray metal, was Yuna. She was the human ambassador. She had held the position for 11 years. She was not tall, she was not loud. She wore a simple dark suit and a thin diplomatic sash across her shoulder that marked her as an official representative of Earth. Her hair was pulled back neatly. Her hands rested on the podium. Her face showed nothing at all. Around her, the noise of 300 species talking at once filled the air like a storm. Translator devices hummed and clicked, turning each language into something the others could understand. The sound echoed off the curved walls and came back as a low roar. Grand Arbiter Valesi stood at the high platform above the chamber floor. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin that shifted color when he was emotional. Right now, his skin was a calm, satisfied shade of deep blue. He raised one long hand, and the chamber slowly fell silent. "The matter before the council today is simple," Valesi said. His voice was smooth and carried easily through the room. "The species known as humanity has expanded beyond the boundaries set by the Accord of Boundaries. They have refused all requests to withdraw. They have ignored formal warnings. They have shown a pattern of aggressive territorial growth that threatens the stability of this council and the peace of the galaxy." She did not move. "Therefore," Valesi continued, "I present the motion for a declaration of corrective war against the human species, to be carried out by the combined military forces of the Council until such time as humanity accepts protective vassal status and withdraws to its original system." A murmur ran through the chamber. Not of surprise. Everyone already knew this was coming. The murmur was one of satisfaction. Many of the species here had been pushing for this moment for years. Humanity was young. Humanity was small. Humanity was annoying. And now, humanity would be put in its place. The vote began. Species after species cast their decision. In favor. In favor. In favor. A few abstained, not because they liked humans, but because they did not want to waste resources on what they considered a minor pest. None voted against. When the count was finished, Valesi turned his gaze down to Yuna. His skin shifted to a lighter blue, almost glowing. He was enjoying this. "Ambassador Yuna," he said, "the council has voted. War has been declared against your species. However, the council is merciful. If humanity agrees now to accept vassal status, to disarm its fleets, and to submit to council governance, the military action will not proceed. You have this one chance. I suggest you take it." The chamber went completely silent. 300 species, thousands of delegates, all looking down at one small human woman standing alone at a gray podium. Yuna looked up at Valesi. She looked around the chamber slowly, meeting the eyes of delegates from dozens of species. Some looked smug. Some looked bored. A few looked almost sorry for her. Then she smiled. It was not a nervous smile. It was not a polite smile. It was the smile of someone who had been sitting at a card table for a very long time, waiting for the other players to finally make the wrong move. She leaned forward into the microphone and said one word. "Finally." The silence broke into confusion. Delegates looked at each other. Translators buzzed, confirming that the word had been translated correctly. Finally. What did that mean? Was it surrender? Was it madness? Yuna did not explain. She reached up, removed her diplomatic sash, and folded it carefully. She placed it on the podium like someone putting away a tool they no longer needed. Then she turned and walked toward the exit of the chamber. Her shoes clicked against the stone floor. The sound was the only noise in the entire room. Click, click, click. Every eye followed her. No one spoke. No one tried to stop her. She reached the great doors of the chamber, and they opened automatically. She walked through without looking back. The doors closed behind her. In the chamber, the silence lasted for several more seconds before it shattered into chaos. Delegates shouted. Valesi called for order. Aides scrambled to figure out what had just happened. But Yuna was already gone. She walked through the corridors of the station quickly, her face calm, their steps steady. 2 human security officers fell into step beside her without a word. They reached the docking bay, where the human shuttle waited. The pilot, a young woman named Heian, was already in her seat with the engines warm. Yuna stepped aboard and sat down. The shuttle doors closed. As the ship pulled away from the station, Yuna reached into her jacket and pulled out a small communication device. She pressed a single button. Thousands of light years away, in a darkened command center, built deep inside an asteroid orbiting Mars, a screen lit up. Taeho was sitting in front of it. He was a tall man with tired eyes and steady hands. He had been waiting for this signal for 3 years. In truth, he had been preparing for it for 20. He read the short message on the screen. 2 words. Protocol Sundown. Taeho let out a long breath. Then he allowed himself something he almost never did. He smiled. He pressed a command into his console, and behind him, the entire wall came alive with light. A strategic map of 12 star systems appeared, and inside those systems, 400 points of light began to glow one by one. Each point was a warship, human warships, built in secret, hidden in asteroid fields and empty moons, and the dark spaces between stars. 400 ships, waking up all at once. Taeho opened a channel to all fleet commanders. His voice was calm and clear. This is Taeho. Sundown is active. You all know your assignments. You have trained for this. The Council just made the worst decision in their history. Now we show them why. He closed the channel and sat back in his chair, watching the lights spread across the map like a fire catching in dry wood. Far behind him, the Grand Chamber was still in chaos. They had no idea what was coming. Taeho had not slept in 31 hours, but that was normal. He had spent most of his adult life running on bad coffee and purpose, and tonight, purpose was enough. The command center inside the asteroid was called Jindo. It had no windows. It had no signs on the outside. From space, it looked like every other dead rock floating in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. That was the point. Humanity had spent 15 years hollowing it out in secret, filling it with equipment, servers, communication arrays, and enough supplies to keep 300 people alive and working for a decade without outside contact. This was where the war would be run from. Not Earth, not any colony. A rock that did not officially exist. Taeho stood in the briefing room and looked at the faces on the screens around him. 12 fleet commanders, each in charge of a battle group stationed in a different star system. They were calm. They were ready. He had trained most of them personally. Before we begin, Taeho said, I want to remind all of you why we are here. Not just the tactical reason, the real reason. He brought up a file on the main display. It was 30 years old. This is the record of humanity's first contact with the Galactic Council, he said. 30 years ago, we sent a diplomatic ship to the Council station. We came with gifts. We came with translators we had built ourselves. We came with open hands and honest faces. He paused. The Council classified us as Tier 9, the lowest rank. They told us we were too young, too primitive, and too violent to be treated as equals. They denied us trade rights. They denied us technology sharing. They told us we could observe, but we could not participate. We were allowed to sit in the chamber, but we were not allowed to vote. We were guests in a house that would never be ours. The fleet commanders listened in silence. They all knew this story. Every human who served in the military knew it. But hearing it before a battle gave it a different weight. Most young species in that position do one of two things, Tejo continued. They beg for acceptance, or they give up and stay in their own corner of space. Humanity did neither. We smiled, we nodded, we said thank you, and then we went home and started preparing for the day the council would come for us. He brought up a new image. It showed a woman with bright eyes and messy hair, grinning at the camera from inside a laboratory. This is Jisoo. Most of you have never met her. She runs a research division that officially does not exist. For the past 20 years, her team has been studying every piece of council technology we could get our hands on. Some of it was traded. Some of it was stolen. Some of it was picked apart from wreckage that conveniently appeared in places where our ships happened to be. Tejo allowed himself a small smile. The Council's military technology is based on energy shields. Every species in the galaxy uses some version of the same system. Their shields are strong, very strong. They are designed to stop energy weapons, projectile weapons, and nuclear weapons. In the last 200 years, no one has broken through a Council-grade shield in open combat. He pressed a key, and a new diagram appeared. It was simple. A black wave pattern cutting through a blue barrier as if the barrier was made of air. Jisoo's team did not try to break the shields. They built something that goes through them. It is called black wave. I will not explain the science, because I do not fully understand it myself. What I understand is this. When black wave hits a shielded target, the shield does nothing. The warhead passes through as if the shield is not there. Every ship in our fleet is carrying black wave weapons. The Council does not know this technology exists. A murmur passed through the commanders. Even those who had been briefed before felt the weight of it when Tejo said it out loud. Next, Tejo said, pulling up another file. Intelligence. A photo appeared of a woman with short hair and a quiet face. She looked like someone who could sit in a room for hours, and no one would remember she was there. This is Sumi. She has been embedded inside the Council's administrative core for 14 years. She holds a mid-level position in their logistics department. She is not important enough to attract attention, and she is important enough to have access to almost everything. Fleet positions, supply chains, communication codes, political alliances, internal arguments. She has sent all of it back to us, and she is still in place. Tejo let that sink in. We know where every Council ship is. We know how much fuel they carry. We know which species hate each other, and which ones are only in this war because they were pressured. We know everything. He turned off the display and looked directly into the camera. The Council has not fought a real war in over 200 years. Their officers have never seen combat. Their ships are big and impressive, but they are designed for parades, not battles. Their strategies are based on old textbooks that have never been tested against a real enemy. He leaned forward. Humanity has been fighting wars since before we could write. We have been at war with ourselves for our entire history. We know what it feels like to be outnumbered. We know what it feels like to lose. And we know what it takes to win when everything is against us. That is something no Council species has ever had to learn. The commanders were silent, not because they were afraid, because they were focused. Ambassador Yuna spent 11 years inside that chamber, playing the role of a quiet, polite diplomat. She let them look down on her. She let them laugh. She let them treat her like a pet. And every single day, she was watching, learning, and feeding information back to us. She maneuvered our expansion into exactly the territories that would trigger the Council's fear. She made them angry on purpose. She made them vote for war on our schedule, not theirs. Tejo straightened up. 30 years, That is how long we have been getting ready for tonight. Every ship you command was designed for this fight. Every weapon was built for this enemy. Every plan was made with their specific weaknesses in mind. His voice was steady and sure. They think they are going to crush a small primitive species. They have no idea that the small primitive species has been waiting for them with open arms and loaded guns. He reached for his console. All commanders, confirm readiness. 12 voices came back, one after another. Ready, ready, ready. Tejo nodded. Then let us begin. He closed the channel and sat alone in the dark room, watching the map of glowing lights that represented everything humanity had built in secret. Somewhere out there, Yuna was on her shuttle heading home. Jisoo was in her lab, running final checks. Sumi was still sitting quietly at her desk inside the council station, invisible and dangerous. And across 12 star systems, 400 warships were moving toward their positions. The council wanted a war. They were about to find out what that word actually meant. Commander Dren stood on the bridge of the council flagship, Eternal Law, and looked at his fleet through the forward viewport. 6,000 warships, gathered from 12 species, stretched across the darkness of space in every direction. They were enormous. Some of them were so large that smaller ships could land inside their cargo bays. Their shields glowed faintly in shades of blue and green, and their weapons hummed with stored energy. It was the biggest military force the Council had assembled in over 200 years. Dren was proud. He had spent 3 weeks pulling this fleet together, and he had given speeches to every major crew about the glory of what they were about to do. They were going to correct a mistake. They were going to remind a small, noisy species that the galaxy had rules, and those rules would be enforced. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. Today we restore order. His voice was deep and carried the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight, mostly because he had never been in one. The humans are scattered across a handful of colony worlds with outdated ships and no real military structure. This will not be a war. This will be a correction. We will arrive, we will disable their defenses, and we will accept their surrender. I expect this to be over within days. The fleet cheered across 1,000 channels. Dren smiled and gave the order to jump. 6,000 ships activated their faster-than-light drives at the same moment. Space bent around them, and they vanished from the staging area in a flash of blue light. Minutes later, they reappeared in the Verath system, a border region where the nearest human colony world orbited a yellow star. Dren looked at the planet through the viewport. It was green and brown, with oceans and clouds. A world that was about to learn its place. "Scan the planet," he ordered. The bridge crew worked quickly. The results came back in seconds, and when the sensor officer read them out loud, his voice was confused. "Commander, the planet is empty. No human life signs, no ships in orbit, no active power systems on the surface. The colony has been evacuated." Dren frowned. Evacuated? When? Based on residual energy traces at least 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks. That meant the humans had started moving their people before the council even voted. Dren felt something cold touch the back of his mind, but he pushed it away. "They ran," he said. "Cowards. Stand for any remaining structures. There is one active signal, Commander, a beacon in orbit. It is broadcasting a message. Play it." The speakers on the bridge crackled, and then a calm female voice filled the room. It spoke in the Council's common trade language, clearly and without emotion. "We moved our people out of courtesy. What happens next is not courteous." The bridge went quiet. Dren stared at the speaker as if it had insulted him personally. Before he could respond, the sensor officer spoke again, and this time his voice was not confused. It was afraid. "Commander, new contacts, behind us. 80 ships just dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They are human." Dren spun around. On the tactical display, 80 small points of light had appeared directly behind the Council fleet. They were tiny compared to the Council warships. Some of them were barely the size of a frigate. 80 ships against 6,000. Dren almost laughed. 80? They brought 80 ships to face us? Open fire. All ships. Destroy them. The Council fleet turned. Thousands of weapons locked onto the human formation. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes launched in a massive wave, filling the space between the two fleets with light. The firepower was overwhelming. Nothing should have survived it. But the human ships were not where the weapons arrived. They moved, not slowly, not cautiously, but with a speed and precision that made no sense. They twisted and rolled and accelerated in patterns that no Council targeting computer could predict. The energy beams hit empty space. The torpedoes exploded against nothing. The entire first volley missed. On the bridge of the HSS Iron Psalm, Captain Dowan stood with his arms behind his back and watched the Council's fire pass harmlessly around his fleet. He was not a man of many words. He had fought in 3 border skirmishes, 2 pirate engagements, and 1 very bad bar fight on a mining station near Saturn. He was calm the way a rock is calm. Beside him, Heyoon sat at the communications console. She was 23 years old, and this was her first real battle. Her hands were shaking, and the light from the tactical display reflected in her wide eyes. "Breathe, Heyoon," Dohwan said without looking at her. "This is just the first day." Heyoon swallowed hard and steadied her hands. Dowan opened a fleet channel. "All ships, Black Wave is authorized. Fire at will." The human fleet fired. From the outside, it did not look special. Small streaks of dark energy left the human ships and raced toward the Council fleet. They were not bright or dramatic. They were quiet and fast and almost invisible against the blackness of space. They hit the Council ships, and the shields did nothing. The first Council cruiser took a direct hit to its engine section. The Black Wave warhead passed through the shield as if the shield was made of smoke. The explosion tore the ship apart from the inside. The second ship lost its entire forward section. A third simply broke in half, its hull splitting along the middle, like a piece of dry wood. Dren watched his display in disbelief. Ships were disappearing from his fleet map. Not 1 or 2. Dozens. The human weapons were ignoring shields entirely. Every shot that hit a ship destroyed it or crippled it beyond recovery. "How?" he whispered. "How are they getting through the shields?" No one on his bridge had an answer. The human ships kept moving, kept firing, kept dancing through the return fire, like insects avoiding a slow hand. They were small and fast, and they worked together with a coordination that looked almost rehearsed, because it was. Every maneuver had been practiced 1,000 times in simulators that Jesus' team had built using exact copies of Council ship specifications. In 20 minutes, the Council fleet had lost over 300 ships. The humans had lost 2. Dohan watched the numbers calmly. Heyoon, her hands now steady, relayed fleet communications with a clear voice. She had stopped shaking. Fear had turned into something else, something sharper. Dren finally gave the order to retreat. The Council fleet, still massive but now terrified, turned and began jumping out of the system. Ships fled in every direction, some of them colliding with each other in their panic to escape. Dohan did not pursue. He had his orders from Yuna. Let them go. Let them run. Let them tell everyone what happened here. As the last Council ships disappeared, Heyoon looked at Dohan. "We let them retreat," she said. "We could have destroyed more of them." Dohan nodded. "We could have. But dead soldiers do not talk. Scared soldiers talk to everyone." He turned back to the viewport and watched the empty space where 6,000 ships had been. "Send the battle report to Teho," he said. "Tell him Verath is clear, and tell him we are ready for the next one." Far away, aboard his damaged flagship, Commander Dren sat in his command chair, and stared at the damage reports. 312 ships destroyed. Over 100 more badly damaged. Human losses, 2 ships. He opened a direct channel to the council station, and when Valesi's face appeared on the screen, Dren did not bother with protocol. "They were ready," he said. His voice was hollow. "They were waiting for us. Their weapons go through our shields. Our targeting cannot track their ships. This was not a battle. It was a trap. All of it. The expansion, the provocation, the refusal to comply. All of it was designed to make us come to them." Valesi said nothing for a long time. His skin had turned a shade of gray that Dren had never seen before. The news from Verath spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Within hours, every species on the Council had seen the battle data. 300 ships destroyed. Human losses, almost 0. Shields useless. Weapons that passed through barriers like they were not there. The reports were so bad that some delegates assumed they were fake, until the surviving crews started arriving home with damage on their hulls and terror in their eyes. The council chamber erupted into arguments. Species that had voted for war with smug confidence 3 days ago were now pointing fingers at each other. The trade alliance from the outer systems blamed the core worlds for pushing the vote. The core worlds blamed Valesi for underestimating the humans. Valesi blamed Commander Dren, who sat in silence aboard his broken flagship and refused to answer any more calls. Within the first week, 3 species formally withdrew from the war coalition. They released public statements saying they had been misled about humanity's military capability, and that they saw no reason to sacrifice their ships for a fight they could not win. 2 more species quietly pulled their fleets back to their home systems, without making any announcement at all. Valesi tried to hold the alliance together. He gave speeches about unity and duty. He reminded the remaining members that the Council had never lost a conflict. He promised new weapons and new strategies. But then things got much worse. Sumi had been sitting at her desk inside the Council's central logistics department when the war began. She had watched the vote happen on her personal screen. She had watched Yuna walk out. She had felt a quiet pride and then gone back to her paperwork, because that was what a good spy did. She waited. When Tejo sent her the signal, she acted. A trade route database that served 4 major species suddenly had errors in it. Ships arrived at the wrong stations. Cargo meant for military outposts ended up at civilian ports on the other side of Council space. Fuel shipments were redirected. Food supplies were delayed. Nothing was destroyed. Everything was just slightly wrong. At first, the Council thought it was a computer error. They ran diagnostics. They found nothing. They fixed the data. The next day, it happened again, but in a different system. Then the communication channels started carrying strange messages. Council military officers would open their secure networks and find between their normal reports a short message in the human language, translated perfectly into the Council common tongue. The messages were different every time, but they all said similar things. Your shields do not work against us. We know where your ships are, all of them. Ask your leaders why they started a war they cannot win. The messages could not be traced. They could not be blocked. They appeared inside the most secure networks the Council had. Networks that were supposed to be impossible for outsiders to access. Panic began to spread. Not among civilians, but among the military officers and government officials who realized what those messages meant. The humans were not just inside their borders. The humans were inside their systems. They had been inside for years. Sumi worked quietly, carefully, and with a patience that most people could not understand. She did not do anything dramatic. She changed small numbers in supply orders. She moved decimal points. She swapped coordinates. She planted the messages in communication logs, and then deleted her tracks so cleanly that the Council's best technicians could not find a single trace. She was one person, sitting at one desk, and she was slowly driving the most powerful government in the galaxy insane. Meanwhile, Taeho launched the second phase of the strategy. He called it strategic humiliation. Human strike teams began appearing in Council space. Not invasion forces, small groups, fast ships. They hit targets that mattered not because of their military value, but because of what they represented. A Council military academy, the most famous training school in the galaxy, was holding a graduation ceremony when a single human fighter entered the system, flew past every defense the academy had, performed a series of impossible maneuvers directly above the ceremony, and then left before anyone could lock a weapon on it. The graduating officers watched in silence as the ship disappeared. Some of them resigned the next day. A major Council shipyard, where new warships were being built, woke up one morning to find that every vessel in dock had been remotely locked. Their engines would not start. Their weapons would not charge. Their doors would not open. Every screen on every ship displayed the same message. We could have destroyed these. Think about that. The shipyard engineers spent 3 days unlocking the ships. By the time they finished, the story had spread to every corner of Council space. Yuna waited until the fear had reached its peak, and then she made her move. She recorded a message and broadcast it on every public channel the Council used. Not military channels, civilian ones, news networks, entertainment systems, public information boards. Every screen in Council space displayed her face for exactly 4 minutes. She did not shout. She spoke in the Council common language with a calm, clear voice. My name is Yuna. I am the human ambassador. Or I was, until your Council declared war on my people. I want to talk to you, not to your leaders, but to you, the ordinary people of the Council. She paused. 30 years ago, humanity came to the Council with open hands. We asked for nothing except to be treated as equals. We were told no. We were ranked at the bottom of your system. We were told we were too young, too primitive, too violent to deserve a place at the table. We accepted that answer with grace, and we went home. Her eyes were steady. For 30 years, we were patient. We grew. We built. We explored. We did not bother anyone. And then your leaders decided that our growth was a threat, and they voted to make war on us. They did not ask you. They did not ask us. They simply decided that we should be put in our place. She leaned slightly forward. Your leaders declared war on us. Ask them how it is going. She let the silence sit for a moment. We do not want to destroy you. We do not want to conquer you. We want what we wanted 30 years ago. We want to be treated as equals. Nothing more, nothing less. But we will not be bullied, and we will not kneel. The broadcast ended. The effect was immediate. Across Council space, civilian populations that had been told the war would be quick and easy began asking questions. Why were trade routes disrupted? Why were military shipments going to the wrong places? Why had 3 species already left the coalition? Why had the first battle been a disaster? Public protests began on 4 Council homeworlds. Not large ones, but enough to be noticed. Inside the Council station, Valesi sat in his private office and stared at a screen showing Yuna's broadcast playing on repeat across his own networks. His skin was pale gray, his hands were shaking. He opened a private encrypted channel. He typed a short message and sent it to the human diplomatic frequency. I wish to discuss terms. On Jindo Station, Taeho received the message and forwarded it to Yuna, who was aboard a ship heading back toward Earth. She read it on her personal screen. Taeho's voice came through the speaker. He wants to negotiate. Do we accept? Yuna read the message again. She thought about the 30 years of smiles and patience and swallowed pride. She thought about every time a Council delegate had looked through her as if she was not there. She thought about Sumi, still sitting at that desk, alone and unseen, for 14 years. Not yet, Yuna said. He is not scared enough, to be honest. Give it one more week. She put the screen down and looked out the window at the stars passing by. One more week. 1 week changed everything. In those 7 days, 2 more species left the war coalition. The Council's economy, already strained by the disrupted supply lines, began to show real cracks. Trade between systems slowed to a crawl because no one trusted the route data anymore. Military commanders refused to move their fleets because they did not know if their orders were real or if Sumi had rewritten them. 3 Council shipyards shut down entirely after their systems were locked for the 2nd time. Commander Dren was quietly removed from his position. No announcement was made. He simply disappeared from the military reports, replaced by a younger officer who immediately requested a ceasefire and was told by Valesi to wait. On the civilian side, the protests grew. Not violent ones, just people standing in public squares and asking questions that their leaders could not answer. On one Council homeworld, a famous news broadcaster ended her program by playing Yuna's message again and saying, "She asked us a question. I think we deserve an answer." Valesi watched all of this from his office on the Council station. His skin had not returned to its normal blue in days. It stayed a dull, tired gray. He had stopped sleeping. He had stopped eating properly. Every report that came across his desk was worse than the last. On the 7th day, he called for an emergency session of the Council. The Grand Chamber looked different now. The last time it had been full, with every seat taken, and a feeling of power and certainty in the air. Now, nearly a third of the seats were empty. Some species had withdrawn from the Council entirely. Others had simply stopped sending their delegates. The ones who remained looked tired and angry, and most of that anger was directed at Valesi. He stood at the high platform and spoke, and for the first time in his long career, his voice was not smooth or confident. It was the voice of someone who had run out of options. "I have called this session to formally request a ceasefire with humanity, and to open negotiations for a peace agreement," he said. There was no argument, no debate. The remaining delegates simply nodded. Valesi sent the official request, and this time, Yuna accepted. 3 days later, she returned to the Council station. She walked through the same corridors she had walked through weeks ago when she left. She wore the same dark suit. Her hair was pulled back the same way. She carried the folded diplomatic sash in her hands. When she entered the Grand Chamber, the silence was absolute, but it was a different kind of silence than before. The last time, it had been the silence of a crowd watching something small and amusing. This time, it was the silence of a crowd that was afraid to speak. Yuna walked to the same gray podium at the bottom of the chamber. She placed the folded sash on its surface, exactly where she had left it. She did not put it on. She simply placed it there, like a reminder. She looked up at the chamber and began to speak. "I am going to keep this simple," she said. "Humanity did not want this war. We did not start it. You did. We prepared for it because we knew, from the very first day we met you, that this was how it would end. Not because we are paranoid. Because we have been young and small before, and we know what the powerful do to the small when they think no one is watching." The chamber was still. "We could have done much more damage than we did. Our weapons can reach every system in Council space. Our intelligence network is inside your most secure systems. We could have done much more damage than we did. Our weapons can reach every system in Council space. Our intelligence network is inside your most secure systems. We chose to be restrained, because we are not here to destroy you. We never were." She paused and let the words settle. "Here are our terms. They are not negotiable." She spoke clearly and slowly, and every translator in the room carried her words to every ear. "First, Humanity will be recognized as a sovereign civilization, with full and equal standing. Not Tier 9, not Tier anything, equal. Second, the tier system will be abolished entirely. No more species ranked above or below others. Every civilization in this council will be treated as an equal member, regardless of how old or how young they are. Third, trade and technology sharing will be open to all council members, including humanity. No more restrictions based on rank. Fourth, the council will issue a formal, public apology to humanity for 30 years of institutional contempt, exclusion, and discrimination. And fifth, humanity will receive a permanent seat on the council's governing body, not as a junior member, not as an observer, but as an equal voice in every decision. She stopped and looked around the chamber. These terms are firm, but I want you to notice something about them. We are not asking for your territory. We are not asking for control of your fleets. We are not asking for payment or punishment. We are asking for what we asked for 30 years ago. Fairness. That is all. Volesi stared at her from the high platform. His skin flickered between gray and a faint uncertain blue. The terms were not harsh. He had expected demands for territory, for reparations, for power. Instead, he was being asked to give humanity exactly what they had originally requested when they first walked into this chamber 3 decades ago. That made it worse somehow. It meant the entire war, the entire conflict, all the destruction and fear and humiliation had been completely unnecessary. It meant the council had brought this on itself. Before the vote was called, a delegate from one of the older species raised a hand and was given permission to speak. He looked down at Yuna with an expression that was hard to read. "Ambassador," he said, "I have one question. How long have you been planning this?" Yuna looked up at him. She thought about Taeho in his dark command center. She thought about Jisoo in her lab, building weapons that should not have been possible. She thought about Sumi, who had spent 14 years alone and unseen, doing the hardest job any of them had been given. She thought about Dohan on the bridge of the Iron Psalm, steady and quiet. She thought about Haeun, young and scared, and then not scared anymore. She thought about herself, standing at this same podium for 11 years, smiling politely while the galaxy looked through her. "Since the first day you looked at us and saw something small," she said. The chamber was silent for a very long time. The vote was called. Every remaining species voted to accept, unanimously. Yuna stepped away from the podium and walked toward the exit. Halfway there, she stopped, turned back, and picked up the diplomatic sash. She unfolded it and placed it over her shoulder. She was the ambassador again. But this time, the title meant something. Later that evening, she stood at a viewport on the station, looking out at the stars. The reflection of the chamber lights was behind her, and the darkness of space was in front of her, endless and full of possibility. He stood beside her without speaking for a while. "It is over," he said finally. Yuna shook her head slowly. "No, this is where it starts. We spent 30 years proving we can fight. Now we spend the next 30 proving we can lead." Taeho looked at her and nodded. He did not smile, because Taeho almost never smiled. But there was something in his eyes that looked like peace. Across the galaxy, the pieces of this story settled into their places. Dohan brought the Iron Psalm back to port. He stood on the dock and watched his crew walk off the ship, alive and whole, and he allowed himself a moment of quiet gratitude before going to write his report. Jisoo opened her laboratory doors for the first time in 20 years. The technology she had built in secret would now be shared openly. She was already making plans for what to build next, and for the first time, she was building things that were not weapons. Sumi left the council station on a civilian transport, carrying nothing but a small bag and 14 years of secrets that she would never tell anyone. She was going home. She did not know what home felt like anymore, but she was ready to find out. And Haeyun, sitting in her small cabin aboard the Iron Psalm, opened her personal log and typed the last entry of the war. They called us small, they called us young, they told us to kneel, we did not kneel, and when they finally asked us to stand beside them, we were already standing. She closed the log, turned off the light, and looked out her tiny window at the stars. They looked the same as they always had, but everything else was different now. Everything was just beginning.